First thing, so the guided meditation that we participated in the first half hour, how was that? Easy? Some people going like this, some people going like this. So congratulations to the ones that found it easy. For the ones who are going like this, why not? Why is it so hard to do something that sounds so simple, right? It's just like, relax, be present. Yes. So your sense is it's kind of new for you. You haven't really practiced it. Yeah. So could you even touch it for a moment? And when you were able to touch it for a moment, how did it feel? Relieving. Did it feel kind of normal? I mean, I know it feels abnormal for us, but it's really normal, isn't it? Just to be relaxed and relieving. The man said relieving, because what were you relieved of? Thinking about the past and future. Yeah, what a relief not to have that on our mind. Anybody else find it wasn't the easiest thing to do in the world or stay there? Just share. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, it was difficult to.
Difficult to.
I want to say difficult to stop thinking.
Yeah, not so difficult not to try to stop thinking because one can't stop thinking. The man says he was able to touch it once or twice, and when you're able to touch it once or twice, what was your experience?
It was very calming.
Calming. It was very calming. Yeah. Anybody else? Everybody had an experience. We were all here together in this. Anybody else want to share? Difficult, challenging? Yes.
I would say hard at first.
Hard at first? And you remembered?
Because I haven't meditated in a bit, so.
You're out of practice, eh?
Yeah.
And when you could get back into that place of being relaxed in the present moment and aware, how did it feel, Abdullah? Great. Easy. It's very interesting, isn't it? You know, how about you, Casey? You shake your hand like that. Could you even touch it? What? Well, I saw you shake your head like this. You were one of the first ones, so, you know.
Not stopping thinking, but
Right.
just trying to not grab it.
Yeah. So Casey said, yeah, it's not stopping, but because we can't stop the same way we don't want to stop. I mean, thoughts can be helpful if thoughts are normal, right? And, you know, we can't stop the sounds of the world. We can't stop the sights of the world. But, you know, so it's hard to just let go. Just let them be. Yes?
I was going to say that it's usually pretty easy here.
Mm-hmm.
Hard at home.
Yes, why is that? So the person said, I have to repeat everything for those online, easy here, hard at home. Well, yeah, right? Because here what? Here we're getting guided instruction, we have support. Yeah, you're right. So unfortunately, we don't all live together, do we? I mean, we're not all just going to stay here forever, and right? So unfortunately, yeah, we go back home, we go back into our lives, our jobs, our relationships. So but yet, this is always here. I mean, it really doesn't matter what we do. Many of us think, I can't do this. I got such a busy life. I got so much to do, right? Anybody ever kind of say that to themselves? Like, yeah, I mean, I don't have time for this. I'm too busy, too many. Of course we have plenty of time to do this, right? In the midst of it all, we can just, take a moment and just relax and let go. We all anybody ever spend time on social media? Anybody spend time on social media? Well, what if you took just a few of those moments and just did this? I mean, which you think would be more beneficial for your body, mind? You don't have to answer that. But it's an interesting question. You see, there's an energy in this life, there's an energy in this culture, there's an energy within our mind that is pushing us. Can you feel it? It pushes us. And you really only feel it, right, when you stop, or you try to stop, right? Like it's like when sometimes you can't see the current, but if you see a rock and you see how the current is pushing against the rock, you're, the water's moving pretty fast. Or, how do we know that the wind is moving? Because, the leaves are fluttering, right? So there is just something pushing us, right? Pushing us in our minds, pushing us in society, and we don't see it until we try to stop. And then we realize there's a lot of energy just pushing me. And it takes some intentionality, it takes some willpower to stop, doesn't it? In the midst of our day, in the midst of our life. So, but it can be done, not perfectly. But again, we got to be very conscious, like Casey, very busy, right? Busy, right? Yeah. I assure you, if just, once every couple of hours, you just took 3, 4, 5 minutes, just turn off the phone, got off the computer, just went, where am I right now? You look around, you stop, you breathe, you relax. You see, you just kind of nurture yourself. You look out the window, you see the sky, you go, oh, it's all right here, isn't it? Everything Thich Nhat Hanh says, everything that we need is already right here. Which is a very bizarre message, isn't it? Because in our society, in our minds, we think everything I need is somewhere else. And I got to expend a lot of energy to get it. Everything I need is in this book, or everything I need is on this podcast, or everything I need is in this place, or everything I need is when I get this, that's when I'll, that's when I'll get everything I need. But the idea that everything I need to be happy, everything I need to be peaceful, I already have. Can you feel what a bizarre message that is in our society? Because the message we're always receiving is, I got to get it, There's something to get. There's something to achieve. There's something to... But the idea that it's already here, and I just need to relax, become aware, notice, just touch it. And it's already right here. Interesting. So what I want to share today is a teaching. Well, let me just say, somebody asked me some questions. I don't know how many here were here 2 weeks ago where I went into this teaching from traditional Buddhism about the Dharma ending age and what's going to be going on. How many people were here for that? Yeah, so a number of you weren't. So I can't, that's posted online, but it really looked into, there's kind of prophetic tradition within ancient Buddhism, sort of talking about how the world was going to be unfolding over these coming 1,000 years. And when I discovered the literature, I kind of looked, I read it, and I went, as I shared with those of you who were here, and if you listened to the talk, it really described our time. And prophecy is something I don't have any gifts at, but I mean, we accept, right, that, like, let's say, global warming, right? We know that there were scientists looking at these issues 50 years ago, right? And really kind of saying and prophesizing, based on what they were seeing, how things were going to be unfolding. Is that true? And here we are. So, in a sense, that's good to know that, oh, these things can be seen and these things can be understood, and therefore they can be dealt with. So in the same way, when we experience the extremities as society and the world is beginning to experience in so many ways within the climate, et cetera, a part of us could say, well, of course this is happening, or this would happen because of, okay? So in the same way, kind of having a framework in terms of this world and what's going on in the world, and go, oh, of course this is why things are the way they are. It really allows us to not be terribly upset or terribly disappointed or terribly angry, but to just go, the answer would be what? What can I do to be of help? I mean, that's really, and so that accepting of what is and knowing that it's unfolding according to causes and conditions really takes out a lot of the emotionality that we often get into in relationship to the unfolding of life, and allows us to just focus on, yeah, this is what's happening. It's all happening because of causes and conditions. What can I do to help? So that's kind of the bigger picture. And that's why I kind of shared that. Somebody had asked me, and that's why I shared those teachings, because I think for me, it's just a reference point to go, yeah, this is the world we live in. This is the unfolding of the world. This is, the nature of human beings' minds and their interaction and what they've been doing and up to are producing all these results, which are really just the way the world's unfolding in all areas of the life. And that's just the way it is. But this is now, anyhow, it's something a little off another direction, but I think very important I wanted to share today. So in Tibet in the 1940s and 50s, there was an interesting, man called Khenpo Gangshar. There's a little book about him and his teachings called Vivid Awareness. And, within Tibetan Buddhism, because it was a very spiritually alive culture up until, modern times, there were many teachers, all over the place. So as opposed to other Buddhist cultures that had gone through periods of kind of paring down, where there were less masters around and teachers around, there were many. So I had never heard of him, but then I came across something, and I think it was less his teachings than his story that sort of impressed me. And it sort of ties in with the talk I gave two weeks ago about, this age we live in, how it's different than past ages. So he was Khenpo Gangshar. Khenpo is sort of like in the Buddhist monastic tradition. A Khenpo is somebody who's like a PhD, academic teacher. So they've kind of mastered the whole monastic curriculum, and they become teachers within the monastic colleges. Okay, so when you're Khenpo, it's sort of like professor. But many of them were also meditators. So he was, a well-known Khenpo. At the time, this is in the early 50s. And if you remember the history of Tibet in the early 50s, the Chinese had taken over Tibet, and there was, or in the process of taking over Tibet. They really didn't finally to 58. So this was, a great time of turmoil, especially within Buddhism, because one of the fundamental tenets of the communists was what? Religion is the opium of the people, and therefore, religion, religious institutions, religious leaders were all being just beginning in those days, being prosecuted, but very small. But Khenpo Gangshar, he saw what was happening, and this was in the early 50s. So this is when the Chinese were just kind of they were pretending that they were very open. They hadn't kind of clamped down totally yet, right? But he saw what was happening. He could see the little things that were happening, that this was a very significant age for Tibetan Buddhism. And basically what he saw what was going to happen. He basically saw that the Chinese were eventually going to basically do their best to destroy all outward symbols of Buddhism in Tibet. So because he saw the urgency of what was happening, and he saw that the preservation of the Dharma, of the teachings, had to be somehow maintained. He basically began to say, we cannot preserve Buddhism in terms of the monasteries, the institutions, all the outer forms, and they had, thousands, tens of thousands of monasteries, temples, monastic institutions, all kinds of stuff. He said, if we think Buddhism is going to be preserved by preserving the institutions, then Buddhism will die. He said Buddhism can only be preserved as a living teaching. Right? It has to be practiced. We can only maintain it in the minds of people until this passes. So he himself all of a sudden began to teach teachings about the mind and the nature of mind and kinds of things to everyone, as opposed to just teaching them to the meditators in meditation retreat huts and the few. He taught it to everybody. He taught it to nomads. He taught it to farmers. I mean, it's sort of anybody. And basically, he set out word in his area to all the hermits and all the people in retreat, come out. We have to, very diligently share these teachings. So what does that speak to me? And because it's sort of like that now, right? We are in. I mean, we're not like the situation that he was in, but we're in a situation where there's this incredible amount of difficulty people have, even concentrating their mind. Lots of social dislocation, lots of stress, lots of problems, local, worldwide. There's just lots going on, and it's a very difficult time for people, and may get even more difficult, young and old. So his attempt to kind of simplify and be much more direct with the Dharma, and really get people to see what is essential. There's a lot, if you've ever hung out in Buddhist circles, traditional Buddhist circles, there's a lot of stuff in Buddhism that's grown over the thousands of years. Lots of writings and lots of teachings and lots of rituals and lots of, lots of, you know what I mean? It's been growing for thousands of years. And his sense, this is not the essence. So he taught in a very direct way, in a very simple way. So I'm just going to share one thing, because I think, again, it just speaks to all of us. And it kind of gives teachings that were usually teachings about the mind and meditation were only for people who had kind of gone through a lot of preparation, right? But his sense was, no, you got to teach this to everybody. Got to teach it to everybody, because everybody's going to need this. So I'm reading. This is from because he lived in such difficult times, and he eventually they say he was eventually arrested, because he was a kind of a kempo, a professor. He was eventually arrested by the Chinese, imprisoned, and they say he died in prison, etc. So there are only a few texts, left from him, because he was not, an active teacher for many years, and there were very difficult times. And this is called Naturally Liberating Whatever You Meet, Instructions to Guide You on the Profound Path. The first section is called the General Preliminaries, but I'm going to share with you from this special preliminaries, and it's very simple. Okay? Very simple principle. So just please, let's all pay close attention. We can all get this. And it may sound, you might go, this is so simple. Of course I know this. But the implications of these things are, we may say, well, I may know it intellectually, but I don't really get it. Okay. So he says, this is the special preliminaries. It is an unfailing fact that happiness results from wholesome, virtuous actions, and that suffering results from committing unvirtuous or unwholesome deeds. Would everybody grant that? Right? Right? I mean, it's kind of a common thing, right? That if an individuals or the world act in a way that creates suffering and violence and, tries to harm people, et cetera, it creates suffering. On the other hand, if people are loving and caring and supportive and all that, it creates a lot of goodness. So we all know that. Okay. So the issue then, he says, is, well, okay, so what is it in a human being that is in charge of, these wholesome and unwholesome actions? Right? I mean, if we want to kind of get at it, so if a human being, we'd say, like if we look around the room or you look around online, the most obvious thing we see when we see other human beings is we see what? We see bodies. Okay? So do you think our bodies are the source of wholesome and unwholesome deeds? Question. The next way that we know each other is through speech. I mean, we see each other, body language, we act with our bodies, we consume, we do all kinds of stuff, and then we talk a lot, right? And our speech, like our bodies, may be wholesome or unwholesome, supportive of the good or actually destructive, right? Now, the one thing we can't see, right? So if you look around the room or you look at me, you can't see my mind, can you? You can't see anybody else's mind, can you? Is that true? I mean, it's kind of an interesting fact. We can see their bodies, we can see their speech, but we can't see their minds. Of course, for many of us, we can't even see our own minds. But that's another whole issue. So then he asks, of the three, which is the most important? Does the body on its own create wholesome or unwholesome actions? Does our speech on its own, our mouth on its own, our tongue on its own? What is this? Who is the master? Who is the king or queen? Who's the ruler of a human being? Anybody should we take a vote? I mean, I'm saying it's so simple. But he's pointing to saying, well, obviously, most people would say, no, it's the mind, right? Right? It is the mind that conditions the actions of my body. It is my mind that conditions the actions of my speech. Is that true? I mean, let's just stop a second. I mean, it sounds so simple, but is that true? Does everybody believe that? Yeah. The source of actions of body and speech that create happiness, support goodness, actions of body, speech that do harm to myself or others and support the unwholesome, it is the mind that is controlling this process, not the body, not the speech. They are not on their own capable. Is that true? Just stop and reflect. I mean, it sounds simple, but do I really believe that of the three, the mind, which of course means my mind, is the source, the controller of my life and the actions that I undertake in my life? Your mind is like a king. Remember, this is feudal Tibet, so kings. And both your body and speech are its servants. For instance, when you get angry at someone, you must examine whether the primary factor for your anger is your mind or the other person. Why are we getting angry at somebody? Who's getting angry? Is it the person, or is it my mind that's getting angry? Jealous, disappointed, frustrated at someone? I mean, is it the person, or is it my mind? Similarly, when you feel attached to a friend, where is the source of that love, that caring, that attachment? Where's it coming from? Coming from my body, coming from my speech, or coming from my mind? So examining in this way, he said, you must acknowledge, although the friend and the enemy, the person we don't like, are the circumstances in which your attachment and anger arise, the real cause originates in your mind. Thus, our minds are what is most important. I mean, it sounds so obvious. Is that correct? Does it sound simple? I mean, does anybody have any problem with this? Online or... I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. Is this the truth? And yet, if we're to ask ourselves, in my life, what am I most attentive to of the three? How much time do I spend on my body, taking care of my body, keeping my body in shape, wanting my body to look a certain way, dressing up my body? I mean, we spend a lot of time, don't we? And then perhaps we spend a lot of time in, how we use our speech and our words to get what we want, or to, all that stuff. But if our mind is really the most important thing in terms of my happiness or lack of happiness, and is really in control of everything, then shouldn't I be spending a good deal of time taking care of my mind? If that's really the most important. So you get a sense why in the Buddhist tradition, self-examination, self-awareness, meditation, all these kinds of things that deal with the mind are very key, key to the practice. Because they are helping us turn around and learn how to pay attention and be self-aware so we know what's going on in our own mind, since it is the controller of the actions of our speech and the actions of our body, which is the way we manifest in the world. Again, we see the outer form of people, don't we? We see each other's bodies, and we hear each other's speech. And we make all our judgments about people, good, bad, like, dislike, based on these outer things. But we don't realize what's really going on is what's the condition of people's minds. So he says this is the first thing that one must recognize. Once you master your own mind, neither friend or enemy will be able to give you great benefit or cause you harm. If you don't gain control over your mind, attachment and anger will automatically well up wherever you go and wherever you stay. You must understand that your mind is the root of all joy and sorrow, good and evil, attachment and anger. Is that true? I mean, I'm sure you're very aware of that, but is that true? Have I really come to realize, have I given up blaming and holding other people, other situations, past, present, and future, as responsible for the state of my mind? Or do I understand it is my mind? These are my thoughts, these are my feelings, and I can be the master, be the mistress, be whatever you want to call it, of my own mind. When I understand that. In other words, I cannot control the world. I cannot control other people. I cannot control so much of the unfolding. But I do have an ability to be more in control of my own mind. Because it is my mind that is conditioning the way I am in life, the way I am in my interactions with life. So then he gets to the really what we want to talk about today. He gets to this, he talks about distinguishing. So we have to, there's some very simple distinguishing that we need to be able to do, all of us. And he says, in this context, you must distinguish between appearances and perceived objects. Okay? So this is kind of basic Buddhist psychology, but it's very important. Okay? So this distinction, being able to distinguish between these two, because we don't distinguish them. We don't see the difference. So what does this mean? So perceived objects are all the things that our senses perceive, right? So we all see things, right? We all see objects. All the time we see objects, right? We hear sounds. We smell odors. We taste tastes. We feel things with our body and touch, right? Is that clear? This is the world of perceived objects, right? And it's a consensual world. Is that clear? I mean, like most of us would agree, now I'm looking around the hall, those of you online would agree, I'm looking around the hall, we would all probably agree on what we see, right? We'd all probably agree on, I'm hearing Fred talking. You see what I'm saying? So there is this world of perceived objects that we share among all beings. The things we see, the things we hear, the things we smell, the things we touch, the things, okay? This is the world of perceived object. But he said, the world of perceived objects and the world of things that appear in our mind are not the same. Now, right? We're all sharing this kind of physical world together, right? We see, we smell, we hear, we taste, we touch, we feel, right? And we can all pretty much have the same experience. But what's arising in our mind is not shared. That's a totally different universe. We're all seeing the same stuff. But what our mind is doing with that stuff is very unique, right? So at the same time that we're all experiencing perceived reality, we're all having different appearances in our mind, different trains of thought, different feeling states, different memories, right? Some people may be having a very good experience now. Some people may not be having a good experience at all. Some people may be liking what they hear. Some people may be bored by what they hear, right? All those mind states are appearing in our minds. This distinguishing between the world of perceived objects that human beings share and the world of what appears in people's minds in the realm of thoughts and feelings and perceptions and memories, we need to be clear, are two different things, at least at this level. Now, why is that important? because we act as if they're the same, right? We don't distinguish between the objective world that we're all experiencing together and the uniqueness, idiosyncratic way that my mind is processing what we're all sharing together. What is the implications of this for us as human beings? To know that I am not living in objective reality, that most of the time I'm living in my thoughts, feelings, ideas about objective reality, which are my own and are not shared by, for example, I mean, that's very important. We're talking really about us as individuals, because so much of our conflicts and divisiveness in life with other people is because why? What? Who's talking? But the separation means I believe my version of reality that is appearing in my mind is true. Well, it's not based on objective reality, but we don't know that. We don't act like that. We're constantly shocked and surprised that other people, even people that we live with, see things totally different than we do. Has anybody ever had that experience? It's shocking, right? Unbelievable. That here we are living together or whatever, having the same experiences, and they see it totally different than we do. Can you see? Because we're not living together in objective reality, we're living in our subjective reality, which is the world of what he's calling here these things that are appearing in our mind. They're not appearing out here, right? Just to belabor this, can you see this? Objectively, we're all having the same experience. Now I'm talking to people, right? People in the hall, we're sitting here, right? Some people sitting in chairs, some people sitting on cushions. You're all facing in this direction. You're looking at me. Behind me is whatever it is. People online are probably looking at a computer screen. They're sitting in a chair, right? I mean, that's objective reality. We'd all agree on that. See, commonality. But we don't live in that. We live in what? Our internal experience. Good, bad, like, dislike, happy, unhappy, right? Now, is anybody aware that in our country, maybe in the world, there are different versions of reality? Has anybody noticed that? You go to one broadcast station and you get one version of reality, then you go to another one and you get a totally different version of reality. Is that true? Now, why do you think that is? Are people living in the world of objective reality? No. They're living in the world of subjective reality. Their ideas, their views, their imaginations, they're right? And that's what's real to them. So, even though what the Kempo is talking about is very personal, it really explains what goes on in this world. You see, as long as human beings acknowledge the significance of this objective reality that we share, we have a chance of what? Of staying together. Okay? But once we lose that connection to an objective reality that we all share and that we all co-create and all part of, and just live in our imagination, just live in our views, just live in ideas, then anything is possible. Just reflect on that for a moment. your own personal experience and the world's experience, wherever it is. For example, is anybody aware that there's a war in Ukraine? Right? Are we all aware of that? Yes. Objective reality, in terms of sight, sound, taste, touch, is what? People are killing each other. Is that true? Right. People are killing each other. People are blowing each other up. People are destroying. Millions of people are fleeing. Right? Great, massive suffering. Is that true? And yet, is that what we're talking about? No. On one side have their version of reality. The other side is their version of reality. And there's no commonality there, is it? It's only when people are willing to drop their ideas, their perceptions, their views, their imaginations, and look at the reality of what's going on. Is there a way that people can finally, come together and see, look what we're doing? Has anybody ever been in a relationship where great suffering is being caused, or some suffering is being caused? Right? Yeah. It's so hard to get people to drop their belief in the truth of their version of reality and see what? The truth is, we're causing suffering for each other. We're causing pain for each other. We're not nurturing happiness for each other and well-being for each other. But people will never do that as long as they're lost in their subjective experience and their belief it's true. That's what the Kempo is saying. So this capacity, so simple to distinguish between objective reality, perceived reality, the kind of co-created world that we've all created together, and the subjective reality of our minds and the things that appear in it. If we don't understand that that our subjective reality has to be in line with the objective reality, great suffering will occur. Right? Many people are not even aware of their own suffering. Right? Many people can't even name their own suffering. I can't tell you how many times people say, well, I have a lot of anxiety and fears, but isn't that normal? I mean, people say that. Isn't that normal? I mean, doesn't everybody have? I say, no, it's not normal. It's abnormal. To live with anger is abnormal. It's not normal. It's something that we are cultivating within our own minds because of the way we think and we remember and obsess, and we have untrained minds. So this distinguishment, this discrimination, so simple. So this is one of the key points that Gangsha shared with people, all kinds of people. You don't need to be educated. You don't need a PhD. You don't need to know anything about Buddhist studies. But we can all understand this because this is about the basic human experience. this ability now to distinguish. There are two things going on all the time. There's the objective reality, the perceived reality that I'm perceiving with my senses, and there is the reality of the things that are appearing in my mind. And the unhappiness or the suffering or the attachment or the yearning or the desiring or the rejecting or the hating or the loving it's all occurring in my mind, in my subjective experience. And many of us have no connection to reality. I mean, how many times do I talk to people? They're okay people. You know what I mean? Went through their course of study, you know what I mean? Passed, they might not have been geniuses, but they kind of, developed competency in life. They went to school, they got a career, they kind of went on in life, they accomplished various things, right? You know what I mean? So objectively, they had relationships, blah, blah, blah. So objectively, they are, have demonstrated a certain level of ordinary human competency and ability, right? Objectively, right? And yet you talk to them and they think they're just like the most unworthy, incapable person. That's their inner dialogue, right? Right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. They don't live in the reality, in an objective reality. They live in their own subjective reality where they've created a narrative about who they are that keeps appearing in their mind, and they think it's real. Why don't we just stop? Think of, does this relate to you at all? Are all your beliefs about yourself and the people around you based on reality, objective reality? Or is it all incredibly subjective? I mean, a lot of our beliefs about life we put together when we're 5 or 8 years old. I mean, like, talk to an 8-year-old. I mean, talk to a 15-year-old. I mean, like, is this, do they have the development, the experience to really kind of do a real assessment of who one is? And I want to take a moment, let's all reflect. And then I'll take questions. Distinguishing between objective perceived reality and the things that appear in the mind. Can we distinguish between the two, or are they all mixed up? I'll just take a few moments to reflect. Just ask yourself that. In my life, can I distinguish between the two? Do I remember to distinguish between the two? Is there a part of me that is clear-sighted enough that I can see objective reality, what's happening in reality, and distinguish them from my subjective response, my emotional response, and know the two may not be true at all? Or do I live my life where they're all mixed up? First, body, speech, and mind. Do I see that mind is the ruler, true ruler of my life? And secondly, within my mind, can I distinguish between objective and subjective reality? So let me take questions. People online can just raise their hand and let Bill know. People in the hall, there's a microphone. So if you have any questions about this, whether to understand what we're talking about here, or how to apply this, or how to live this, or is this really an issue for you? Both people online in the hall. Any questions about this?
One online, Fred?
Yes.
Can our experience ever really be quote unquote objective and not filtered through our minds, even if the filter is Dharma?
Yeah, so the question is, can we ever achieve a state of utmost clarity? Well, this is supposedly the state of the deeply enlightened person who's really cleared up all their subjectivities, who are no longer living in any type of subjectivity and live totally open and present and aware and responsive to what is. Okay? So if that is the goal, then as practitioners, we start where we are. Okay? We start where we are. So the first thing is to realize. Now again, this is a traditional text coming out of us. We have other ways within the context of our modern society. We talk about filters. Anybody ever hear that word? Filters. That we have these filters in our minds, which we're not even aware of, that are filtering all our experience. A filter means things are filtered in, things are filtered out. So the way we are perceiving things and thinking about things and reflecting on things may have nothing to do with an objective reality, because we're always just taking in pieces, and we respond to the pieces, right? So if I have a fundamental belief that, I'm unworthy, or I'm stupid, or nobody's gonna, I could be giving a talk right somewhere, and there could be 100 people, and everybody's listening to me, and in the back there's somebody yawning or falling asleep, and right away the thought comes up, what? 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 Or just, I'm a bad speaker. You see what I'm saying? I mean, it's like we filter out. You see, I filter out all the people who are paying attention. And I just know, and luckily I don't do that, but I know people do that. But that's just a little example. We're endlessly filtering in, filtering out. And we think it's real, because that's what we attend to. Right? You get into something with somebody, and all you're obsessing about is what? This thing that they did. Right? Right? What's filtered out? The other 100 good things that they've done. Right? All you're obsessing about is their one bad quality, right? And all their good qualities filtered out. Does that sound familiar? Right? I mean, it's crazy. Crazy, not crazy, but crazy like it's not rational. It's distorted. Right? So we want to come out of distortion. So what is meditation? What is mindfulness? How can it be helpful? It helps us to see clearly. Learning, when I walk, I just walk. Wow, that's all that's going on. Right? That's all that's going on. I'm just walking, touching, stepping. What's going on right now? I'm just breathing. I'm just aware. That's all. Whether I'm doing a good job or a bad job, good meditator, bad meditator, that's all what? That's a world of subjective appearances. Nothing to do with reality. Is that true? I mean, it's endless. Yeah, so practice is about freeing ourselves so we can live peacefully, with great openness, open-heartedness, in reality, as it is. And to do that, we need to get out of our subjective reality, which is just keeping us ensnared in what? What? In the narrative of self, the narrative of me. And then we wonder why we feel separated, disconnected. How could we not? Because I live my life, even though, see, the reality is we are all connected. We are all interconnected, right? You know, what is this whole global warming and the whole world system out of balance showing us? We're all interconnected, right? You know, the decisions that are made in one country affect the other countries, right? We're all interconnected. We're all part of this planet. We're all part of this whole system. I mean, we don't exist outside it. But it's very hard for most people to see that reality. Because we live in what? We live in our subjective reality, our own little worlds. So we don't feel connected. So mindfulness, meditation, clearing up our minds so we can live in reality, deal with reality in a very clear, open-hearted, fearless way, is why we practice. It's a process. Other questions in the hall? Everybody clear? I mean, if you're not clear, if you have any questions about how this looks or apply it or what this means, please this is important. I go into the supposition if no one's asking a question, then everybody gets it and everybody's satisfied, which is fine. But if you don't, let's hash it out. Yes, in the back there. The gentleman in the back. Hold on, so people can hear you or not.
So what I'm left with is, what do we do?
No. What do we do? Well, the first thing we do is we just follow along here. We kind of really reflect deeply on this, like the first part, you know, body, speech, and mind, which is most important. You know, do I really get that? Right? Do I really get that? Do I really live with the idea, that it's, you know, I need to pay a lot of attention to my mind because, you know, it is in my mind that is the gestation of all my speech and all the actions of my body, right? I can't hold my body responsible for what it does. Can you? We like to pretend, oh, look, the body's just doing that by itself. No, the body's not doing it by itself. The body's hooked into our mind. It's just following directions, right? Or, you know, I can't believe I just said that. I mean, what? The mouth has a brain of its own or something? It's gonna, we you know. All right, that's number one. Do I really get it? Number two, am I really reflecting and distinguishing between that, you know, in the world of my mind, there is a perceived reality and then there is the things that appear subjectively. Am I willing to really learn to distinguish that throughout the day? What does that mean? Okay? What does it mean? It means, again, mindfulness, learning to be present in the here and now, which we did, you know, which may sound like esoteric meditation, is really just basically, fundamentally learning how to be present to reality as it is. Right? Am I present to reality as it is? Objectively. Do I live in reality as it is? Or do I live in my thoughts about reality, which are not the same? Do I live in my stories about reality and about people? Distinguish. And am I willing to let go of my stories, to touch the reality of the other person? How do you touch the reality of another human being? How do you do that? If you don't know how to let go of all your thoughts and all your projections that we're putting onto that other person, and just see them as they are, by looking at them, by listening deeply to them. Listen deeply means I'm not filtering what they're saying, right? Learning not to filter, just to listen. People, if we listen to people, we will learn who they are. Okay? It's not that hard. People will tell you who they are if you're paying close attention. Not lost in the words, but by listening deeply to people, they'll tell you who they are. Good, bad, or indifferent. If you look at people, faces have a lot of language, right? How they hold their body. There's a lot that we can learn about people just by being present to them, by being interested in them. Right? Reality. But we live in this constructed reality where we have these endless opinions and judgments. You know what I'm talking about? And we think that's real. And we act on that. Right now in Ukraine, 2 totally different narratives. Is that true? And where does that end up? They're just killing each other. Killing. Destroying. I mean, there's got to be another way for human beings. Right? Same way, I mean, it's going on. I mean, that's big. What's going on in people's relationships, families, communities. It's all the same thing, isn't it? So, human beings without the capacity of perceiving an objective reality, yeah, it's very difficult. Everybody's accusing everybody else of listening to fake news, right? You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, what do you do? If all news is fake news, then what? I mean, you see where this leads. Right? If anybody can have if anybody can have any idea about reality is true, very, very, very screwy world, and a very dangerous world when people believe their ideas about truth, about reality are true. Ideas about other people. Yeah. So that's why, this little thing that we're doing here is very helpful. Because people don't know how to come back out of their subjectivity to experience this shared reality. The people on the left, people on the right, like we're all in this together. Right? I mean, visionaries have seen that. We're all in this together. Bill, anybody?
Yeah, common thread here, Fred, to some of the questions. I'll just use one of them.
Uh-huh.
How do we know that what we are hearing is the truth when so much information we hear is being filtered? Which version is the objective reality if we can't see it directly?
Well, that is a problem, right? This is a problem that we have in our modern world. See, these guys didn't have a problem, right? Because the reality of their world was happening right there in their world, right? They didn't get their information about the world through media. I mean, we can get information about the whole world, not even what's going on in our town, our village, or our country, right? We can get information about the whole world. Are we getting it directly from people? No. So you just do your best. I don't have any answers. You do your best. You try to, make up your own mind by, if you can, objectively investigating what's going on, the facts. But see through the subjectivity and the views and the ideas, see, that's what the Buddha did. He looked through it all and said, people are suffering. That's all. Sickness, old age, and death, they're suffering. It scares them, it angers them. They get sad. They have trouble just dealing with sickness, old age, and death. Right? They just dealing with the ups and downs in life, gain and loss. Right? They have trouble. They're happy when they gain, they're unhappy when they lose. Right? They're happy when they're noticed, and right? Everybody's they're happy. But when they're not noticed, they're unhappy. They're happy in coming together, they're unhappy in parting. He said, this is, yeah. So, this is like fundamentals. The Dharma really is about fundamentals of what it means to be a human being and how to lead in the midst of all this, like Thich Nhat Hanh says. How can we be happy? How can we be peaceful? How can we maintain our open heart, our loving heart? How can we stay compassionate, right? In the midst of all this? Because we have to have an inner reality that is true for us and is not, as was said here, if we're the master of our own hearts and minds, then we can't be pushed around by what goes on in the external world. Right? That's something we all have control over. Control over who's what news is real and what news is fake and but the one thing I know is I'm here right now. I'm here. You all know the same thing. Wherever you are, you're here. And throughout the day, whatever you do, you will be in the present moment reality. How do you want to show up today? How do you want to use this precious life today? Can you see? That's doable. So, that's what we call our path engaged Buddhism. It's engaged in life, engaged in reality. It's not some mystical thing. On that note, I will end for the day. Thank you, everyone.